Emily Carter's earliest memories were of the sky. Long before she could understand politics or history, she had understood airplanes. In the quiet town of Cedarville, with its winding streets and golden fields, she would lie on the grass for hours, watching jets streak across the horizon. The roar of engines, the contrails tracing brilliant white lines across the blue, was a sound that filled her with both awe and longing. While other children played in backyards or chased one another down streets, Emily built model airplanes with her father, carefully painting every stripe and insignia, imagining herself at the controls. Her father, Robert Carter, a seasoned aircraft mechanic who had worked on everything from small Cessnas to military trainers, often watched her with a mixture of pride and quiet worry. "Don't get your heart set too high, kiddo," he'd say, tightening the screws on a model's wing. "The sky isn't easy on anyone." Emily never argued. She simply smiled, her eyes sparkling with determination. To her, the sky wasn't just a place, it was a calling. She whispered to the clouds as if they could hear her, "One day, I'll fly up there, and I'll be the best." School was a different battlefield. Teachers and classmates humored her fascination with flight, but never took it seriously. "Planes are for boys, Emily," a classmate sneered once, tossing a crumpled paper airplane onto the floor. Her cheeks burned, but she refused to react. Instead, she spent her evenings in the town library, poring over books about aviation history. Amelia Earhart, Jacqueline Cochran, and the women of the Women Air Force Service pilots became her secret heroes. They had flown when the world said no, and she would do the same. By middle school, Emily had joined the local youth aviation program. Every Saturday, she would trudge through hangars smelling of oil, rubber, and polished metal. She learned the basics of aerodynamics, engines, and navigation, her fingers becoming more confident with every bolt she tightened or switch she toggled. Other students often mocked her, whispering that she wouldn't last long, but Emily didn't care. She had a stubborn streak that ran deeper than fear, a silent promise to herself, "I will prove them wrong." Her first flight in a small trainer aircraft was transformative. Sitting in the cockpit, she felt the vibrations through the controls, the subtle shifts of air over the wings, and the sudden, liberating lift as the plane left the ground. Her heart raced, a mixture of terror and ecstasy. When she touched down, her cheeks flushed, but her eyes glimmered with the knowledge that she had glimpsed her destiny. "This is it," she whispered. "This is where I belong." At home, the Carter household was filled with quiet encouragement. Her mother, Susan, always a grounding presence, cautioned her about the challenges ahead. "Emily, the Air Force isn't easy. People will doubt you. They might even try to stop you." Emily nodded, her gaze steady. "I don't care if they doubt me," she replied. "I only need to believe in myself." Her father ruffled her hair, secretly proud, though he worried every day about the obstacles she would face as a girl in a male-dominated world. High school brought the ROTC program, which Emily joined with fervor. The cadet drills, physical challenges, and leadership exercises were demanding, and many boys underestimated her. Yet she pushed harder than anyone, rising before dawn to run laps in the frost-bitten air, enduring weight training and memorization drills with a fierce focus. Each small victory, perfecting a formation, leading a squad through a tactical exercise, fed her growing confidence. The more she proved herself capable, the more some classmates tried to knock her down. But Emily had learned to turn criticism into fuel, ignoring the laughter and whispers, and letting her achievements speak. Her evenings were often spent alone, reading flight manuals or watching vintage airshow recordings. The camera angles, the roar of engines, the daring aerobatics, everything fascinated her. She imagined herself in the cockpit, feeling the adrenaline as gravity tried to pull her down, as control and precision became one. "One day," she whispered to the night, "they'll know my name. There was no arrogance in her promise, only an unwavering certainty that her life's purpose lay somewhere far above the earth. Graduation loomed, and with it, a crossroads. Emily had been accepted to the Air Force Academy, a place where she would face the highest levels of competition and scrutiny. The acceptance letter felt like both a triumph and a summons, a call to prove herself beyond what she had ever imagined. Packing her bags, she felt a mix of excitement and fear, leaving behind the familiar fields and small-town faces that had shaped her. She knew that once she stepped onto the academy grounds, every assumption about her would be challenged. Every prejudice, every doubter would confront the strength of her resolve. The day she left for the academy, Emily lingered on the front porch, looking up at the sky one last time before the sun dipped behind the horizon. The contrails of a distant jet glinted in the fading light. She clenched her fists, a silent promise echoing through her mind. I will fly higher than anyone expects. I will take the sky, and nothing will stop me. That quiet determination, nurtured in the fields of Cedarville and shaped by endless hours of practice, would become the foundation of a legend, the story of the girl who looked up, and would one day make the world realize she belonged above it all. Her journey had begun, but the world had no idea of the heights she was about to reach, or the battles she would face. Emily Carter was no longer just a dreamer. She was a pilot in the making, and the sky would soon remember her name. Emily Carter stepped onto the sprawling campus of the United States Air Force Academy with a mixture of awe and apprehension. The buildings gleamed in the Colorado sun, their sharp angles and towering spires reflecting both ambition and discipline. Everywhere she looked, cadets moved with precision, their steps measured, their voices formal. The air was electric with expectation, a constant reminder that only the strongest, smartest, and most disciplined would survive the grueling years ahead. Emily felt a flutter of nerves, but it was quickly replaced by resolve. She had come too far to falter now. Her first weeks were a trial by fire. The academy's halls were filled with whispers and sideways glances. Male cadets, accustomed to dominating both the field and the skies, looked at her with skepticism. "Sky Barbie?" one muttered under his breath as she passed. Emily ignored it, letting her eyes remain focused, her stride unwavering. Insults and jokes ricocheted off her like bullets from a machine gun. She had grown used to doubt in her small town, but here, in this crucible of excellence, every criticism carried the weight of history, the unspoken belief that girls could not lead, could not soar, could not survive the pressure. Training was merciless. Dawn brought physical challenges that tested both body and mind. Emily ran laps in freezing Colorado air, her breath turning to frost, muscles screaming with exhaustion. She lifted weights until her arms trembled and pushed herself through obstacle courses that left her scraped and bruised. Simultaneously, academics demanded precision and speed, navigation, aerodynamics, radar systems, military law, strategy. Every lecture was a mental workout. Every lab a test of focus. Some days, it felt impossible. Some nights, the weight of fatigue and self-doubt pressed on her like an invisible vice. But Emily had learned early to transform discomfort into determination. She thrived where others faltered. Flight training brought a new set of challenges. Emily climbed into the cockpit of the T-38 Talon for the first time, a mixture of awe and anxiety tightening her chest. The aircraft's engines roared like wild beasts as she took to the skies. Her fingers danced across the controls, navigating the plane through sharp turns and simulated dogfights. Sweat trickled down her back as she pushed the limits of both the jet and herself. The radio crackled with commands from instructors, critiques that could have broken her. But she absorbed them all, refining every maneuver, learning the language of the sky in ways that textbooks could never teach. Her classmates watched, some with curiosity, some with doubt. Emily could hear whispers behind her back, muttered predictions of failure, ridicule hidden beneath forced politeness. But she refused to be diminished. Every precise maneuver, every perfect landing, was a quiet rebuke to the skeptics. Instructors noticed her poise under pressure. One gruff pilot muttered after observing a simulation, "She's good. Better than most." Emily's heart soared, though her face remained stoic. Praise was fleeting. Performance was constant. She had learned to focus on what she could control. Her life at the academy was a delicate balancing act. She formed friendships slowly, carefully, never fully trusting those who had doubted her. One cadet, a confident and brash male named Ryan, became both a rival and an unlikely ally. He mocked her early on, daring her to prove she belonged in flight simulations he had dominated for years. Emily responded with calm determination, often outperforming him quietly, refusing to gloat. Over time, a mutual respect formed, a silent acknowledgement that both pushed the other to excel. In Ryan, Emily discovered a reflection of her own drive, and a competitor who would one day become a trusted wingman in combat. Evenings were her sanctuary. After long days of physical exhaustion and mental strain, Emily would retreat to the dormitory, sometimes to her small desk by the window overlooking the mountains. She pored over aviation manuals, her eyes scanning diagrams of F-16 cockpits and engine schematics. She memorized every button, every gauge, every emergency procedure. She watched flight recordings, analyzing aerobatic maneuvers, tactical formations, and dogfight simulations. Her mind was a constant whirl of strategy, precision, and anticipation. Sleep was often short, stolen in fragments between training, study, and personal reflection. Yet every night she felt the growing pulse of confidence, a rhythm that matched her heartbeat whenever she imagined herself in the cockpit. The social challenges were no less complex. Cadets formed tight-knit groups, often excluding those who didn't fit preconceived molds. Emily's gender made her stand out, sometimes painfully. There were dinners she wasn't invited to, late-night exercises where she felt isolated, and moments when the male-dominated culture pressed heavily against her resolve. But Emily had an inner compass. She learned to navigate the subtle politics of the academy, choosing her battles carefully and letting her accomplishments speak louder than the whispers. Then came her first solo flight in the T-38. The morning air was crisp, the sky a vivid blue canvas stretching infinitely above the academy. Emily climbed into the cockpit, heart racing, knowing she was about to face the ultimate test of training and nerve. Engines roared to life, vibration humming through her body. The runway stretched before her, long and challenging, but she focused, breathing methodically, hands steady. As the aircraft lifted into the sky, the world below shrank and the horizon expanded. Every maneuver, every turn, every climb and dive demanded precision and calm, and Emily delivered flawlessly. When she landed, the silence of the airfield felt almost sacred. Instructors and cadets alike stared in astonishment. Emily removed her helmet, cheeks flushed from exertion, and met the gaze of one gruff flight instructor who nodded slowly. "Not bad, Carter," he said. "Not bad at all." For the first time, Emily felt the sting of skepticism soften. She had earned respect, if not yet admiration, and more importantly, she had proved to herself that she could rise above doubt, above fear, above the limitations others sought to impose. That evening, Emily walked alone across the academy grounds, the mountains silhouetted against the setting sun. The wind whispered around her, carrying the chill of altitude and the faint hum of distant aircraft. She felt the first surge of understanding. The academy was more than a school. It was a crucible, shaping those who could endure, adapt, and overcome. And she was ready to endure, adapt, and ultimately soar. The whispered doubts, the jokes, the underestimation, they had only strengthened her resolve. Emily Carter was no longer just a cadet with dreams. She was a pilot in formation with destiny, ready to carve her name into the skies. And somewhere deep within, a quiet thought resonated like a drumbeat in her chest. They don't believe in me yet. Good. I'll make them. Emily Carter's graduation from the Air Force Academy marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, one far more challenging than she could have imagined. She had earned her wings, yes, but the world she was about to enter was not filled with applause or admiration. It was filled with expectation, competition, and the unspoken rule that women didn't lead in combat. Assigned to a prestigious F-16 squadron, Emily walked into a hangar filled with the most advanced fighter jets the Air Force had to offer. The sleek lines of the F-16, its polished metallic surface glinting under the fluorescent lights, seemed almost alive, humming with potential. To Emily, it was not just a machine. It was an extension of her will, a challenge that demanded perfection. Her fellow pilots were men who had been flying jets since they were teenagers. Some eyed her with a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. The youngest in the squadron, and the only female, Emily was greeted with polite nods but cold, measured distance. Whispers followed her everywhere. "She's too small for that jet," muttered one pilot, his smirk barely hidden. Another joked, "Bet she'd be lost in the simulator for weeks." Emily said nothing. She had learned long ago that words were wind. Performance was reality. She let the jet speak for her. Training began immediately, rigorous beyond anything she had experienced at the academy. Pre-flight briefings were intense, detailing every control, every potential malfunction, and every tactical scenario she might encounter. Emily immersed herself in the manuals, memorizing every button, switch, and system. Nights were often spent in the simulator, navigating dogfights against virtual enemies, learning to anticipate every move. The instructors, veterans of real combat, watched closely, noting her precision and calm under pressure. Slowly, some of the skepticism softened. Emily's competence could not be ignored. Her first solo flight in the F-16 was an experience that she would never forget. Sitting in the cockpit, she felt the raw power of the jet vibrating through her body. The engine roared to life like a caged beast released. Emily's hands, steady and confident, guided the plane down the runway. The moment the jet lifted into the sky, she felt an intoxicating mix of fear, awe, and exhilaration. The world below shrank, the horizon stretched infinitely ahead, and for the first time, she felt truly free. Every turn, climb, and roll was executed with meticulous precision. When she finally landed, instructors and fellow pilots stared in stunned silence. Emily removed her helmet and simply said, "Ready for more." Life in the squadron was demanding. Days were long, filled with maintenance checks, strategy sessions, and multiple flight drills. Nights were sometimes even harder, with simulations testing her response under extreme pressure. Emily was expected to perform flawlessly, not just to survive, but to earn her place. The weight of being the only woman in the unit was ever present. Any mistake would not just reflect on her. It would feed prejudices and validate doubts. She could not afford failure. Despite the pressure, Emily began to form bonds with some of her fellow pilots. Ryan, the brash cadet who had once been her rival at the academy, was now her squadron mate. Initially wary, they found mutual respect in the air. He pushed her, challenged her, sometimes even doubted her decisions, but always with an underline, understanding that they would rely on each other in life or death situations. Through him, Emily realized that strength was not just skill, but the ability to trust and lead others. There were also moments of isolation. Emily's gender made her stand out, sometimes painfully. She overheard conversations that doubted her. Abilities, saw meetings she wasn't invited to, and felt the subtle exclusion of a culture used to male dominance. But she had learned resilience at Cedarville and honed it at the academy. She refused to let exclusion define her experience. Instead, she let her actions speak louder than whispers, her performance on missions and in simulations gradually turning skeptics into allies. Her days often began before sunrise. Pre-flight inspections demanded meticulous attention. Every panel, every gauge, every system had to be checked and double-checked. A single oversight could mean disaster. Emily's routine became ritualistic, almost meditative. Hands steady, eyes sharp, she treated the F-16 not as a machine, but as a partner, a silent extension of her instincts and will. By the time she entered the cockpit, she had already won half the battle. Then came the first live combat simulation, a test designed to push pilots to their limits. Emily was assigned a mission that most would have considered daunting for veteran pilots. Intercept multiple enemy aircraft in a complex engagement scenario. As the jets climbed into the sky, radar screens flickering with targets, Emily felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. She executed each maneuver with precision. Barrel rolls, evasive climbs, sharp dives, and calculated missile strikes. The virtual enemy fell one by one under her control. When she returned to base, instructors were stunned. Emily had not only completed the mission, but had done so with exceptional skill, earning quiet nods of respect from even the harshest critics. But the lessons were not only technical. Leadership was as important as piloting. Emily learned to read her wingmen, anticipate their movements, and guide formations with authority. In high-pressure situations, split-second decisions could mean life or death. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. The ability to act decisively when the world seemed to tilt beneath her. Every flight, every mission, honed her skill, sharpened her instincts, and fortified her resolve. Emily's reputation began to grow. Slowly, the whispers turned from doubt to admiration. Her instructors began to recommend her for advanced tactical training, while her peers, once dismissive, now sought her guidance in simulations. Yet Emily remained focused, never letting praise distract her from preparation. She knew that the skies above were unforgiving. One misstep could be fatal. Every hour she spent mastering the F-16 brought her closer to the moment when her skills would be tested in the reality of combat. A moment she could already feel, approaching like the distant hum of an engine on the horizon. Even in moments of rest, Emily's mind remained in the sky. She studied the F-16 systems late into the night, memorizing emergency procedures, engine specifications, and aerial combat tactics. She visualized dogfights, imagining herself dodging missiles, coordinating with wingmen, and striking targets with precision. Every night, she whispered to the stars, promising herself that when the time came, she would be ready, not just to survive, but to excel beyond anyone's expectations. And so, Emily Carter entered the elite world of F-16 pilots, young, determined, and unrelenting. She was no longer just a cadet with dreams. She was a pilot with purpose, a force to be reckoned with, and a woman in a male-dominated world who refused to be underestimated. The path ahead was dangerous and uncertain, filled with trials she could not yet imagine. But she was ready. The sky had claimed her heart, and she would meet its challenges head-on. Emily Carter was prepared to transform every doubt, every sneer, and every obstacle into fuel for flight. One day, the world would see not just a young woman in a cockpit, but a legend in the making, someone who would rise above expectation, master the F-16, and change the course of the skies forever. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet certainty resonated. They may not believe in me yet. That's fine. I'll make them. The deployment orders came suddenly, a crisp envelope delivered with the authority of command. Emily Carter, now a seasoned F-16 pilot, but still the youngest and only female in her squadron, stared at the document with a mixture of exhilaration and apprehension. She had trained for this moment, and no simulation or academy exercise could replicate the reality of combat. The war zone was a vast desert region, miles from civilization, where the sky was both enemy and ally, where every maneuver could mean life or death. The jet she would soon pilot was no longer a machine for practice. It was a weapon, a shield, and a lifeline. The air base itself was a harsh place, a temporary city of tents, concrete, and steel, surrounded by endless sand and the hum of engines. Heat radiated off the tarmac, and the scent of fuel, exhaust, and dust clung to everything. Soldiers moved with purpose, their faces hardened by experience, eyes constantly scanning the horizon. Emily felt the weight of expectation settle on her shoulders. Her reputation as a disciplined, precise pilot preceded her, yet she was still measured, still observed, still waiting to see if she could truly rise to the occasion in real combat. Early mornings were a blur of preparation. Pre-flight briefings detailed intelligence on enemy activity, surveillance reports, and tactical plans. Emily memorized every variable: wind speed, radar coverage, potential threats, and the limitations of her own aircraft. She checked and rechecked her F-16, running diagnostics, inspecting every panel and system. She knew that even a minor oversight could be catastrophic. Unlike training, where errors were corrected without consequence, here a mistake could be fatal. For her wingman, for the mission. Her first sorties in the region were both exhilarating and terrifying. Flying low over desert plains, Emily felt the sun sear her cockpit canopy while sensors beeped continuously. Enemy radar signals flashed intermittently, and the slightest misjudgment could trigger an alarm, a scramble, a lethal engagement. Communication with her squadron was constant. Every decision had to be immediate and precise. Emily discovered a new dimension to her training, the constant, gnawing tension that came from knowing that every second carried consequences far beyond her own life. She thrived under this pressure, her instincts honed to perfection, her focus unbroken even amid chaos. There were moments of terrifying beauty as well. Sunrise over the desert painted the horizon in gold and crimson. Clouds, rare in this region, floated like ghostly ships across an endless sea of sand. The wind whistled past the cockpit at supersonic speeds, a reminder that she and her jet were one, a single entity capable of both immense destruction and astonishing grace. Emily would sometimes close her eyes briefly during flight, not in relaxation, but in communion with the machine and the sky, feeling the pulse of the engine through her bones. The threat level escalated almost immediately. Intelligence reported enemy MiGs crossing into the region's airspace, agile, well-trained, and intent on challenging American supremacy in the skies. Emily's first patrol missions brought her close encounters with radar signals, shadowy blips on screens that could erupt into violent confrontations at any moment. She felt a thrill of anticipation, a cold knot of fear that demanded mastery, and the electric certainty that her moment was approaching. Every maneuver she had drilled in simulators now carried the weight of reality. She would not be training anymore. She would be surviving, leading, and striking. Her wingmen, veterans of multiple deployments, initially treated her with skepticism. Some tested her with simulated exercises mid-flight, attempting maneuvers that pushed her to the edge of control. Emily anticipated, countered, and executed each with calm precision. Slowly, respect began to take root where doubt had grown. Ryan, her old rival turned ally, offered subtle nods of acknowledgement after particularly sharp turns or evasive maneuvers. She learned quickly that leadership was not declared, it was earned, in the sky and on the ground. Every successful sortie built credibility. Every decisive maneuver forged trust. Living conditions at the base were relentless. Nights were filled with intermittent sleep, the hum of aircraft engines never ceasing, and the occasional distant thud of artillery or small arms fire in the desert beyond. The heat by day and the chill by night tested even the hardiest of soldiers. Yet Emily maintained her routines, inspecting her F-16, reviewing mission plans, and visualizing every potential aerial engagement. She had learned that preparation was not just a tactic. It was armor, a shield against the unpredictability of war. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of patrols, Emily walked alone to the edge of the tarmac. The sun was setting, painting the sky in a violent orange, and the F-16s rested like metallic predators in neat rows. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here, a girl who had once stared at the sky from Cedarville, who had trained tirelessly at the academy, who had endured skepticism and exclusion. And now, she was on the precipice of real combat. The thought of facing enemy MiGs, possibly for the first time, tightened her chest with both fear and anticipation. The very next morning, the moment arrived. Radar screens lit up with multiple blips. 4 enemy MiGs had breached the border. The airbase erupted into motion. Alarms, radio chatter, hasty pre-flight checks. Emily's pulse accelerated, a familiar rhythm of adrenaline and focus. She climbed into her F-16, heart pounding, hands steady. The roar of the engines drowned out all other thoughts. Her training, her instincts, her years of preparation, they coalesced into a single, sharp point of focus. She knew that the moment of truth was here. As the F-16 lifted off the tarmac and into the sky, Emily felt the weight of responsibility settle firmly on her shoulders. She was no longer a trainee, no longer a cadet testing her limits. She was a pilot in combat, the leader of a mission whose outcome would test everything she had learned. The desert stretched below, vast and unforgiving, and the horizon held both promise and peril. In her mind, she replayed every maneuver, every contingency, every lesson drilled into her from childhood to the academy to the squadron. And above it all, a single thought resonated like a drumbeat through her mind. This is what I was born for. This is the sky I have trained to master. Emily Carter had entered the fire, and the battle for mastery of the skies had begun. The real test was upon her, and she was ready. The morning air was thick with tension, an electric charge that made every sound sharper, every movement more deliberate. Emily Carter and her squadron had been scrambled to intercept hostile MiGs that had penetrated the border. 4 enemy aircraft, highly trained and aggressive, posed an immediate threat not only to their airspace, but to the ground forces and civilians below. As Emily climbed into her F-16, the engines roaring to life beneath her, she felt the familiar mix of fear, adrenaline, and exhilaration. This was no simulation, no drill. This was the sky alive with danger, and she was at its center. Her squadron took formation, the morning sun glinting off the metallic surfaces of the jets. Emily led the formation, her eyes scanning radar and horizon simultaneously, processing hundreds of data points in mere seconds. Every blip on the screen, every glint of metal in the distance, represented a life or death decision. The MiGs moved fast, aggressive, and coordinated, a formidable enemy. Emily felt the pressure in her chest, the hum of the engine vibrating through her body, but her mind remained razor sharp. Fear was present, but it was subordinate to focus. As the enemy appeared on the horizon, the first missile locks triggered alarms. Emily's hands moved instinctively, guiding her jet into sharp rolls and evasive climbs. The desert stretched beneath them, sand-colored and unyielding, while the sky became a chaotic theater of smoke trails, radar signals, and jet engines screaming in unison. Communication over the radio crackled with terse commands. Eagle 1, engage. Watch your 6. Her wingman, Ryan, stayed close, his trust in her instincts absolute. Together, they maneuvered like extensions of each other, anticipating moves before they happened. Emily's first engagement was precise. A MiG veered aggressively toward their formation, targeting one of the younger pilots. With a combination of throttle adjustments and roll maneuvers, she intercepted the enemy, lining up her weapon systems with calm precision. The missile launched, streaking across the sky, and the first MiG exploded into a burst of fire and smoke. For a moment, silence reigned in her cockpit, the quiet that comes after immediate danger, a heartbeat to collect herself before the next challenge. The second MiG came swiftly, flanking her from the side. Emily executed a perfect barrel roll, twisting the F-16 in three-dimensional space with grace and deadly efficiency. Her hands danced over the controls, her eyes scanning multiple instruments simultaneously. Within seconds, her targeting system locked on. The missile launched, and the second MiG disintegrated in meter. Her wingman radioed in surprise and awe, and Emily's calm voice cut through the static. Targets neutralized, stay alert for the others. The adrenaline surged, but there was no room for celebration. 2 more MiGs remained, each one a lethal test of her skill and composure. The third MiG maneuvered aggressively, attempting to separate Emily from her squadron. She anticipated the move, banking sharply and using the terrain below to her advantage. Sand dunes blurred beneath her, the engines roar like thunder in a storm. The MiG fired, missiles arcing toward her F-16. With split-second timing, she evaded the attack, then countered, locking onto her enemy. The missile struck true. The third MiG erupted in flames, its trajectory spinning helplessly out of control. Emily's breath came in measured bursts. She felt the surge of accomplishment, but tempered it with focus. One threat remained. The fourth MiG was cunning, circling above and attempting to outmaneuver the formation. Emily's eyes scanned, calculating angles, velocities, and potential escape routes. Every decision was instant, instinctual, and precise. Her heart pounded in sync with the vibrations of the jet, but her mind was clear, unwavering. With a deft series of maneuvers, she closed the distance, her targeting systems confirming lock. The missile streaked from her jet, catching the MiG in a fiery explosion that lit up the morning sky. 4 confirmed kills, a feat almost unheard of, especially for a pilot so young and under such extreme pressure. The radio crackled with stunned voices. Ground controllers, commanders, and even her fellow pilots struggled to find words. Emily's voice, calm and collected, broke the silence. All targets neutralized. Returning to base. There was no triumphal note, no exaggeration, only fact and control. Her wingman, Ryan, finally spoke, awe and respect lacing every word. "Emily, you just did something unbelievable." She responded with a modest nod, adjusting her flight path. There was pride, yes, but it was tempered by the awareness that the mission was not over until they were safely on the ground. The return flight was tense. Enemy radar activity had subsided, but the aftermath of the engagement required careful navigation. Emily's focus remained absolute, guiding the squadron through precise maneuvers and ensuring all jets returned safely. The desert stretched below like a vast, indifferent witness to the violence that had just occurred above. Every pilot was silent, each lost in their own thoughts, processing the intensity of what had just transpired. Emily, too, reflected, though she remained vigilant, aware that danger could return at any moment. As the squadron approached the base, the gravity of the mission began to sink in. Emily's hands were steady, her posture calm, yet inside, her pulse was a drumbeat of adrenaline and awareness. The F-16s descended toward the runway, engines screaming, tires gripping asphalt with precision. One by one, the aircraft touched down, metal scraping against concrete, systems shutting down, radios filled with static and exhausted relief. Emily rolled her jet to a stop, removing her helmet, sweat and grime marking a long, harrowing engagement. Around her, ground crews rushed, mechanics staring in astonishment. They had witnessed her skill, but even they were unprepared for the story that would unfold. Alone in the cockpit for a moment, Emily let herself breathe, the tension easing slightly. She glanced at the wingmen jets, each representing lives she had helped safeguard. The mission had tested her beyond anything she had ever known. Her training, instincts, and courage all pushed to the limit. And she had succeeded, not through luck, but through preparation, focus, and an unyielding will. Her mind, however, was already shifting forward, understanding that in the sky, no victory was permanent, and vigilance was the only constant. As the dust settled and the squadron secured the airfield, Emily felt a quiet pride mixed with humility. She had faced the enemy, executed maneuvers that would be studied and remembered, and returned without loss of life, her own and that of her wingmen intact. The world above the desert had shifted, if only momentarily, to acknowledge her mastery. Yet Emily Carter knew this was just the beginning. The sky would always demand more, test more, and she would rise to meet it every single time. Above all, a singular thought echoed in her mind. This is what I was made for. This is where I belong. The hangar was unusually quiet after the chaos of the mission. Engines had cooled, the desert sun cast long shadows across the tarmac, and the hum of radios had dimmed to static. Emily Carter sat in the cockpit of her F-16 for a few moments longer than necessary, her hands resting on the controls, absorbing the reality of what had just occurred. 4 MiGs neutralized. 4 lives saved. Her focus had never wavered during the engagement, but now the adrenaline drained, leaving a mixture of exhaustion and disbelief. She had done something that few pilots, male or female, could ever claim. Mechanics and ground crews moved cautiously around the jets, whispering among themselves. The word spread quickly. The pilot who had downed 4 enemy aircraft was not a seasoned veteran as they had assumed. It was Emily. Some stared in disbelief, scanning the hangar for confirmation. "That can't be her," muttered one technician. She's a girl." But Emily, climbing down from the cockpit, wiped sweat from her brow and adjusted her flight suit with quiet composure. She was aware of the stares, but said nothing. Her actions had already spoken volumes. Commanders arrived, the tall figures moving with the authority of rank and years of experience. They had monitored the engagement, watching the tactical genius and precision of the young pilot. As Emily approached, one of them, a seasoned colonel with decades of service, studied her with a mixture of astonishment and respect. "Captain Carter," he began, his voice steady but layered with awe. "We underestimated you." Emily's expression remained neutral. She had trained to perform under pressure, but she hadn't flown to impress anyone, only to survive, succeed, and protect her squadron. Reporters were already being ushered onto the base. Cameras clicked, microphones were adjusted, and the hum of media personnel filled the air. Emily had expected interviews eventually, but not so soon, not in the immediate aftermath of the dogfight. Questions were shouted over each other, some professional, some incredulous. Who was the pilot that downed 4 MiGs? How does it feel to be the first woman to achieve this? Are you really the youngest pilot in the squadron? Emily stood silently for a moment, letting the murmurs build. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, measured, authoritative. "I flew because it was my duty. The mission came first. That's all that matters." Even within her squadron, reactions were mixed. Ryan, her wingman, had been stunned silent during the return flight, processing Emily's flawless execution. Now, seeing her walk confidently through the hangar, he found himself struggling to articulate the respect he felt. I didn't realize," he admitted, shaking his head. Emily offered a small, professional nod. There was no triumph in her expression, only focus, She knew this mission was only one of many that would define her career. Yet Ryan realized that the quiet girl who had once been underestimated had now cemented her place not just as a capable pilot, but as a legend in the making. Back in the command center, senior officers analyzed mission data. Radar tracks, engagement logs, and combat simulations all highlighted Emily's extraordinary tactical decision-making. She had acted swiftly and decisively, protecting her wingmen and eliminating all threats with minimal risk. Her performance was textbook perfect, yet also instinctively creative, moves that no simulation could replicate, born of courage and precision under fire. One officer muttered, almost to himself, "We didn't just underestimate her. We missed witnessing the birth of a tactical genius." The press soon caught wind of her story. Headlines began appearing almost immediately. Young female pilot shoots down 4 enemy aircraft. F-16 ace emerges from the shadows. And they didn't know she was an F-16 pilot until she took down 4 MiGs. Emily's life changed overnight. Calls for interviews, commendations, and recognition poured in. Yet amidst the fame, she remained grounded. She returned to her routine with quiet determination, knowing that every moment in the cockpit demanded vigilance. Every engagement required skill, and that heroism was only meaningful if it served the mission. Her family back home in Cedarville reacted with a mixture of pride, disbelief, and elation. Her parents, who had watched her stare at the sky as a child, now saw their daughter acknowledged worldwide for her courage and skill. They had believed in her unwaveringly, but even they had not fully grasped the magnitude of her accomplishment until the reports and footage emerged. For Emily, the support of her family was a quiet comfort, a reminder of why she had endured skepticism, exhaustion, and danger. Yet alongside recognition came pressure. Emily understood the implications of her success. Every mission, every sortie, every decision would now be scrutinized more closely. Being a woman in combat, especially one who had shattered expectations, came with additional weight. Missteps could be amplified. Criticism could be harsher. But Emily had faced doubt before, in Cedarville, at the academy, and within her own squadron. She knew the path of excellence demanded resilience. She had endured, adapted, and overcome before. She would do so again. In the quiet moments, away from cameras and accolades, Emily reflected on the mission itself. 4 MiGs down, but the memory of danger, the roar of engines, the close calls, these moments were etched permanently into her mind. She felt no desire for glory, only an acute awareness of the responsibility she carried. The sky was unforgiving, and those who underestimated it or her would soon learn that precision, courage, and focus were her true allies. Her fellow pilots gradually adjusted their perception of Emily. Whispers of doubt were replaced by nods of respect, requests for guidance, and in some cases, awe. She had earned her place through action, not words, and the airbase now knew they had a pilot who could be relied upon in the most extreme conditions. Emily, for her part, continued to act with humility, understanding that true leadership was quiet, deliberate, and demonstrated in both triumph and preparation. Even as news of her feat spread globally, Emily remained focused on the mission at hand. She knew the war was far from over. Threats were constant, and the next engagement could arrive without warning. She trained, she prepared, she studied, and she flew, not for headlines or fame, but because the sky demanded excellence, and because lives depended on her precision. She had been revealed to the world, but she carried herself with the same calm determination that had always defined her. That evening, after the awards and interviews, Emily stood in the hangar alone, looking at her F-16. A metallic beast gleamed in the setting sun, a reflection of both danger and opportunity. She touched the cockpit gently, feeling the vibrations that once coursed through her in battle, remembering the thrill, fear, and focus of the dogfight. The desert wind whispered across the tarmac, carrying the distant hum of engines from returning flights. Emily whispered back, almost to herself, "We did it. And this is just the beginning." The world had discovered Captain Emily Carter, the quiet girl who had always looked up at the sky, underestimated and overlooked. They saw her now as a hero, a prodigy, a legend in the making. But for Emily, the recognition was secondary. Her focus remained unwavering, her resolve unbroken. She knew that the sky would always challenge her, that danger would always lurk, and that the next mission demanded even greater skill, courage, and composure. And somewhere deep inside, a voice resonated with certainty. "They didn't know I was an F-16 pilot until now. But I will always be ready, and the sky will never forget me." Fame came quickly, but it was a double-edged sword. Emily Carter's extraordinary feat had captured the world's imagination, but the relentless spotlight brought a weight few could understand. Reporters, social media, and military briefings now scrutinized every flight, every decision, and even her personal life. While others celebrated her heroism with pride and admiration, Emily felt the quiet, knowing pressure that comes with being both exceptional and visible. The sky demanded perfection, and the world demanded explanation. For Emily, the two were inseparable. Back at the base, days began early and ended late, but Emily's nights were restless. Sleep was punctuated by the hum of jet engines, flashbacks of maneuvers, and the mental replay of each missile strike. Even in quiet moments, the memory of the MiGs, the sudden evasive maneuvers, and the precise calculations that had saved lives lingered. Victory was never simple in combat. It came with the weight of responsibility and the awareness of how close danger had truly been. Every pilot understood this, but for Emily, the margin for error had always felt even thinner. Her squadron continued to treat her with a mixture of awe and subtle wariness. Some viewed her as an inspiration, a demonstration that skill and courage could overcome doubt. Others, particularly older pilots, worried about the consequences of attention and expectations placed on someone so young and visibly extraordinary. Emily navigated these waters quietly, avoiding both arrogance and self-doubt. She focused on flying, knowing that competence and leadership were proven in the cockpit, not in conversations or accolades. The media attention grew, and with it, the human stories behind the headlines became complicated. Interviews with journalists demanded poise and composure, yet Emily often found herself answering questions about her identity rather than her mission. "How does it feel to be the first woman to down 4 MiGs?" one reporter asked. Emily answered calmly, "I flew because it was my duty. The mission came first. That's all that matters." But even as she spoke, a quiet frustration lingered. Her skill, her strategy, and her courage had always defined her. Now, her gender was often the focus. She had become a symbol rather than a pilot. The emotional toll of combat became increasingly apparent. Emily had witnessed moments of human vulnerability. Wingmen forced to eject over hostile territory, the smoke of destroyed aircraft, the terrified expressions of ground troops relying on air support. The glory of victory was tempered by the cost of survival. At night, she would replay events in her mind, questioning decisions, analyzing maneuvers, and acknowledging the thin line between life and death. There were nights when the adrenaline faded, leaving only the weight of responsibility pressing on her chest. Even in moments of downtime, Emily rarely found peace. The base's gym became a refuge where she could channel stress into physical exertion. Each push-up, each lap, each lift reminded her that discipline was both weapon and armor. She spent hours in the simulator, refining tactics and running hypothetical engagements, knowing that in the sky, even the smallest miscalculation could be fatal. Her body grew stronger, her reflexes sharper, but her mind carried the unseen scars of leadership, courage, and survival. Family connections, once a source of grounding, were now tempered by distance and duty. Emily's parents, proud and supportive, lived thousands of miles away, receiving updates through news reports rather than personal communication. Letters and occasional video calls were brief and filled with restrained worry. Her father, Robert, often cautioned, "Emily, don't forget that your life is precious. We're proud, but we're scared too." Emily reassured them quietly, though she knew the weight of risk could never truly be alleviated. Her mother, Susan, reminded her gently, "You've always reached for the sky. Just remember to breathe, to rest, and to come home." Amid the fame and pressure, Emily's personal life remained largely private. She had little time for relationships, social outings, or ordinary pleasures. The camaraderie she shared with her squadron became her family, yet even there, connections were shaped by duty, discipline, and mutual reliance rather than leisure. There were moments of laughter, of shared stories, but these were brief and precious. Emily understood that the glory of her achievements came at the cost of personal normalcy, a sacrifice she accepted silently. Mentally, she began to feel the strain of constant vigilance. Every engagement demanded acute focus, every flight carried risk, and every decision had consequences beyond herself. She found solace in small rituals, inspecting her jet meticulously, reviewing mission plans repeatedly, and visualizing each maneuver before it happened. These habits were both protective and grounding, a way to maintain control in a world defined by chaos. Emily had learned that excellence in the cockpit required discipline, preparation, and emotional resilience, and that without these, survival was impossible. Yet despite the pressures, Emily's resolve never wavered. She found strength in the knowledge that her skill saved lives, that her precision made a difference, and that her courage inspired others. Letters from young women and aspiring pilots arrived regularly, praising her accomplishments and sharing dreams she had once held herself. These messages reminded her why she endured scrutiny, fatigue, and emotional strain. Her journey was not only personal. It had become a symbol, a beacon of possibility in a world still learning to recognize female excellence in combat. Emily also confronted the private cost of fame. She realized that every mistake, no matter how minor, would be magnified. Every decision in the air could become headline news. The scrutiny that came with her unprecedented accomplishment made personal failure a public event. She carried this awareness with humility, focusing on preparation and mastery rather than recognition. The weight of expectation was heavy, but Emily had learned to embrace it, to transform pressure into focus and fear into performance. One evening, after another grueling sortie, Emily found herself alone on the desert tarmac, looking up at the sky she had conquered and been tested by countless times. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting clouds in shades of fire and gold. Her F-16 gleamed in the fading light, a symbol of both her achievement and the responsibility that came with it. Emily rested her hand on the canopy, reflecting on the journey that had brought her from a small town to the heights of legend. She thought of Cedarville, of her parents, of the academy, and of every skeptic she had ever encountered. Each obstacle had prepared her for this. Each doubt had been a lesson, each challenge a stepping stone. The cost of glory was clear. Fame, responsibility, scrutiny, and the weight of lives depended on her skill. Yet Emily understood that this price was inseparable from her calling. She had chosen the sky, the challenge, and the danger. She had earned her place among the elite, and she would honor that through unwavering dedication. Emily's eyes swept the horizon, the vast desert below, and the infinite blue above. She whispered to herself, a quiet affirmation. I endure. I rise. I fly. The world had seen her heroism, celebrated it, and placed her in the spotlight. But Emily knew that the real challenge was internal, mastering fear, sustaining courage, and maintaining focus under relentless pressure. Every day demanded discipline. Every flight demanded excellence, and every mission required the balance of heart and mind. She had become a legend, yes, but the cost of that legend was the quiet, unseen struggle that came with holding lives and the sky itself in her hands. As darkness fell over the base, Emily returned to her quarters, her mind already reviewing flight plans for the next day. The mission was never truly over. Danger was always imminent, and skill alone would not guarantee survival. Yet Emily carried a quiet confidence born of preparation, experience, and unbreakable will. She had faced the enemy, earned respect, and survived challenges that would have broken others. And she knew that whatever came next, she would meet it with precision, courage, and the unyielding belief that the sky was where she belonged. The cost of glory was steep, but Emily Carter understood it intimately. And in that understanding, she found both strength and purpose. The world had changed its perception of Emily Carter, and so had she. No longer just a young pilot testing her limits, she had become a living legend, the girl from Cedarville who had defied expectations, shattered ceilings, and dominated the sky. Recognition came from every corner: medals of honor, commendations, and invitations to speak in military academies. Her story became part of the Air Force's lore, studied by cadets as a lesson in courage, precision, and the transformative power of dedication. Yet Emily remained grounded, aware that heroism was not in accolades, but in the mastery of skill and duty. Her squadron, once skeptical and wary, now treated her with a blend of respect and admiration. Ryan, her longtime wingman and friend, often joked quietly, "Guess you finally proved us all wrong." Emily simply smiled, her eyes reflecting the depth of experience beyond words. Leadership was no longer a title, but a demonstrated ability. In the skies, she led with quiet authority, her instincts sharp, her decisions precise, her courage unquestioned. She had become the standard, the benchmark against which others measured themselves. Emily's fame spread beyond military circles. News outlets, documentaries, and biographies celebrated her feats, portraying her as a symbol of courage, intelligence, and resilience. Young women around the world wrote letters, sharing dreams of flight and ambition sparked by her example. Emily read each letter carefully, feeling both pride and responsibility. She realized that her actions inspired others, and that the legacy of a pilot was not only in victories, but in the dreams she ignited. Each story, each letter, became a quiet affirmation that her journey had meaning beyond the battlefield. Despite recognition and accolades, Emily maintained the discipline that had shaped her from Cedarville to the Air Force Academy to the squadron. Her days were filled with training, mentoring, and preparation for missions that could arise without warning. Even in times of peace, she treated each sortie with the same intensity as her first combat engagement. The sky was unforgiving, and Emily understood that excellence was a constant pursuit, not a milestone to be celebrated and forgotten. She also understood the sacrifices that accompanied her success. Friends, family, and personal connections often came second to duty. Emily had learned to balance the desire for connection with the necessity of preparation and vigilance. Nights were often solitary, spent reviewing flight plans, running simulations, or reflecting on the lessons of past engagements. She carried the weight of lives, her wingmen, civilians, and the responsibility of defending airspace with quiet determination. Yet she never allowed these burdens to deter her, only to sharpen her focus and resolve. Emily's influence extended to the next generation of pilots. Cadets at the academy studied her missions, analyzing her tactical decisions and precision maneuvers. Instructors cited her dogfight as a masterclass in aerial combat, split-second calculations, anticipatory instincts, and calm execution under immense pressure. She mentored young pilots personally, sharing lessons learned from both success and hardship. Her guidance went beyond mechanics. She taught resilience, mental fortitude, and the courage to defy expectation. Each mentee carried a piece of her legacy, prepared to take to the sky with the same dedication and integrity. The accolades culminated in a ceremony at the Air Force headquarters. Emily stood on the stage, medals gleaming under the bright lights, her F-16 parked proudly in the background as a symbol of both challenge and triumph. The audience, a mix of military personnel, journalists, and cadets, rose in applause. Emily remained composed, acknowledging the recognition with humility. As the colonel spoke of her courage, precision, and transformative influence, Emily's thoughts drifted back to Cedarville, to the girl who had watched the sky with wonder and ambition. She realized that her journey had been shaped by every challenge, every doubt, and every lesson learned along the way. Yet Emily's most profound legacy was personal. She became a symbol of possibility, that dedication, courage, and intelligence could overcome prejudice and skepticism. She inspired countless young women and men to dream beyond expectation, to challenge limits, and to pursue excellence relentlessly. Her story was not just about victories in the sky, but about resilience, integrity, and the belief that the impossible could be achieved through focus and determination. Emily's example transcended gender, nationality, or rank. She had become a hero defined by skill, courage, and unwavering resolve. Even as the world celebrated her accomplishments, Emily continued to fly. Each sortie was a reaffirmation of her dedication, a reminder that skill and vigilance were eternal companions. The desert, the mountains, and the endless blue sky remained her domain, challenging, unforgiving, yet profoundly liberating. She carried her experiences not as trophies, but as tools, each engagement sharpening her instincts and strengthening her character. Victory was not a static accolade, but a continuous journey, and Emily embraced it fully. In quieter moments, Emily reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The girl from a small town, the cadet who faced skepticism, the pilot who conquered fear and mastered the F-16. She thought of her family, mentors, wingmen, and even those who doubted her. Each person, each experience had shaped her, forging a pilot capable of extraordinary feats. The sky had tested her, challenged her, and rewarded her, and she had risen to meet every expectation, surpassing even her own. As the sun set on another day, Emily stood beside her F-16, eyes on the horizon. The desert stretched endlessly, a canvas of possibility and danger, while the sky promised both challenge and freedom. She understood that her story was far from finished, that the legacy of a pilot was not measured in accolades alone, but in courage, preparation, and the lives touched through action. Emily Carter had become more than a name. She was a symbol, a guide, and an inspiration. And as the stars began to appear, scattered like diamonds across the darkening sky, Emily whispered to herself, a quiet affirmation of her journey and her purpose. I have flown. I have endured. I have inspired, and I will continue to soar. The sky is mine, and so is my legacy. Emily Carter had taken the impossible and made it real. She had proven that skill, courage, and unwavering dedication could transcend expectation, gender, and limitation. Her story would be told for generations, a living testament to what it meant to rise above doubt, conquer fear, and master the skies. The legend of the young F-16 pilot who took down 4 MiGs would forever shine, a beacon for dreamers, warriors, and anyone daring enough to look upward and say, I can.